views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to the Bronx Buzz. As you probably know by now, this is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and journalists and editors and photographers and filmmakers. And one of the guests this evening is going to be an artist who is putting stuff out and giving you a chance to put stuff out. But we're going to start right at the top of the program with a gentleman who wrote an op-ed piece. When I looked at that piece, I said, boy, does this cut to the core of what it's about in the Bronx. So I want to welcome a professor emeritus of urban policy and planning at Hunter College and the Graduate Center at CUNY, as well as the author of New York for Sale and the editor of Transformative Planning. It is Tom Angotti. Mr. Angotti, nice to have you with us, sir.
Great to be here.
When you you look at the title of a book called Transformative Planning, I think that gives my Bronx friends and neighbors a chance to say, we know all about the lack of transformative planning in the city of New York. So tell me a little bit about your perspective and why you wrote what I thought was a fantastic op-ed piece in City Limits.
Well, I'm an urban planner and I've taught urban planning and I've worked as an urban planner, 8 years as a senior planner with the city of New York. But the city doesn't do planning. It does zoning, which is a substitute for planning. It doesn't really do it. It doesn't deal with anything except square feet, which is what developers are interested in, getting more square feet. And for a long time, I've been an advocate of long-term comprehensive planning instead of piecemeal development, which is what the city does, project by project, developer by developer. And so the city council put out a report just recently calling for comprehensive planning. It would require the city to do a long-term comprehensive plan every 10 years. And it would be a process that would engage people at the local level, presumably in the kinds of public hearings and discussions that we know the city commonly does. And I just felt that their proposal was half-baked. That is, it's great to have long-term comprehensive planning coming from the top down, that is, coming from a mayor's office, an office appointed by the mayor. But without bottom-up planning, it'll just be another way that the developers will be able to cut through the city bureaucracy and get their projects approved. And the community boards don't have the staff, they don't have the funding, they don't have the power, really engage in a significant way.
Let's just interject on the power, because all of their decisions and votes are advisory, and it doesn't amount to a heck of a lot. New York City is a very complex place, as we all well know. Is New York City too large to make that kind of comprehensive plan? And once you start looking at, the 5 boroughs, or even in our case, just the borough of the Bronx as a whole, which is complex enough, aren't you going to eventually come down to, let's do this neighborhood, this neighborhood, this neighborhood, and cordon it off piecemeal, which you frankly objected to?
Well, that's a dilemma, and that's a real problem. It's a big city, but it's also inserted within a much bigger region. The majority of population in the New York metropolitan region, which you can't really easily separate from the 5 boroughs. Um, Highways go through both. The infrastructure covers the region, but we don't have regional planning. So let's talk about the city of New York. That's a big chunk of the region, and that is and the city can control it. It has a citywide budget. It has a citywide or potentially a citywide plan for its infrastructure and for controlling development and for dealing with all of the major challenges up front, including the challenges confronting us due to climate change. Um, and our buildings are the major contributor to global warming.
We have been through zonings here in the Bronx. Let's look at the Jerome Avenue zoning that was people were very upset about. The Southern Boulevard zoning to the moment has not fully gone through because the chair of the Land Use Committee, Rafael Salamanca, said, I want to know what's really going to be the effect of this. That was like the first notion of like, hey, wait a minute, we're not doing this without a real plan. Let me ask you this. You had put out a 5-part proposal in your op-ed piece, which is very interesting. What if we just took 2 things and I'll extract something out of it? What if we made, and I mentioned this earlier, community boards votes made them actually to have a seat at the table. So it wasn't just advisory, that it actually, a community board could stop a plan, number one. And number two, give the community boards, which I know you're for, give the community boards a larger budget so that they could put a couple of real planners, either on staff or use those funds to do a better job. Is that a good first step to deal with this Euler process that's essentially out of control?
Yes, it's a first step, and it was it has been on the agenda of many community boards for ever since they were created in 1977. The city actually, there was a charter revision in the 1980s that required that every community board have a planner. Well, what happened to it? The mayors keep saying, oh, go to the city planning department, they'll help you. That's not good enough. You need to have a staff. I mean, we have community boards that have populations of up to 200,000 people. And that's bigger than most of the cities and towns in the rest of the state of New York. But they don't have a staff.
If I think that the decentralization, if you will, of community boards and taking the power out started with the Giuliani administration, and Mike Bloomberg, who was a top-down guy and a developer in that way, picked right up on it and didn't say, well, let's go back and restore the funding and restore the power to the community boards. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Literally down my block, there's a row of very nice private houses. Many of them have been there for a long time. I think the 3rd or 4th one in has been abandoned and in disrepair for a long time. Well, there's a developer who got hold of the property as of right, is ready to put up a 6-story building. I can't think of anybody in the neighborhood who thinks that's a good spot for a 6-story building. That discussion and vote is coming up in the community board literally tonight or tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow night. And it doesn't matter what the community board said, even though everybody in the community says no, especially if the local council member is not going to get in the way. That's it, right?
Well, of
what I'm
course,
telling you is a real story.
there need to be procedures and there need to be rules that community boards follow, in addition to getting the resources. And there's a legitimate concern among everybody that community boards are truly representative of the populations they are supposed to represent. That's a problem. That's a problem you don't easily solve. And one of the biggest problems is that it's left to the borough presidents and the city council people who appoint folks to the community boards.
A self-propagating kind of process, so to speak.
Yeah, and who are the borough presidents? That they're leftovers from the 19th century. Let's let's figure out a different way to govern ourselves so you don't have kingmakers deciding how communities are going to organize their decision-making process.
We had a mall. I'm living in the Van Cortlandt Village section of the Bronx. We had a mall put in on Broadway, which I believe was misnamed because they called it Riverdale Crossing, which it's not Riverdale Crossing. It's in Kingsbridge, so that's another issue. But they never planned for the traffic or the parking. And if you go there at 4:30 in the afternoon with all the people coming out of BJ's and people going to the Buffalo Wild Wings and people just trying to get home after work, I mean, they never planned it. Let's face it. Before we run out of time, do you think with a new city council, and many of them are going to be young people, many of them will be more progressive or grassroots people, do you think that we have a chance to finally take a look at how we handle development and land use in the city of New York? Or are you concerned that the structures will just perpetuate the same issues?
I'm hopeful that the city council is actually becoming more representative, younger people, more progressive, reflecting the ethnic and racial diversity of the city. Um, and they are going to have to confront a lot of the remnants of the old system that has created this very top-down set of line agencies, all under the thumb of a powerful mayor. And as we approach democracy, which means diversity, uh, I think those central silos are going to have to break down, so people have more control over their immediate environments. And that's the thing. Uh, People are demanding more engagement because it's essential for improving the quality of life, for solving the big problems that we face, everything from policing to environmental degradation to education, has a local solution as well as a citywide solution. And unfortunately, this reform proposal that's coming out of the city council only looks at it from the top down and doesn't really empower communities to engage in this process. And you know what they're doing is they're going to say city government's going to come up with a 10-year plan that has a no growth, a high growth, and a middle road to choose from. And then community boards are going to be left with these three choices.
With a limited structure in which to work. We're essentially out of time, but I appreciate that we ended somewhat on a hopeful note, because maybe there is hope, and giving people the power to or the authority to dictate their own neighborhoods is a very good thing. And I'm very grateful that Tom Angotti wrote the op-ed piece in City Limits. Thanks, City Limits, for publishing it. And let's hope that we allow for greater input from local voices. Thank you so much, Tom Angotti, and you can check out his op-ed piece in City Limits. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back with a wonderful Bronx artist who is doing some amazing things, putting it out for the people of the Bronx. Don't go away.